My name is Omari, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and I've been a Muslim for 14 years now. Um, I work in the information technology industry, and I currently live downtown Detroit with my wife and my three children. And I'm talking today to you about the transition that I had from a point of disbelief to the point of becoming a Muslim. Um, I became a Muslim in the spring summer time frame of 2001. This was a few months before 9/11 occurred. And prior to that point in time was a probably about a 5 year transition of reading a lot of literature, a lot of material. But two major pieces of literature that I read that was influential for me was Alex Haley's Roots, as well as the autobiography of Malcolm X. And these two books informed me or led me down the path that of the truths relied, I'm sorry, the truths around the fact that West Africans had an Islamic background. And this is something that a lot of African Americans were not taught or not aware of. Um, and so, therefore, that sparked my interest in Islam, as if this was something that was torn away from these individuals, and so therefore is not present in the current day life for African Americans. But that wasn't enough. I mean, if their religion had been something else, then it wouldn't be a logical reason to accept that religion simply because ancestors or forefathers had that religion. And so therefore, um, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X because I wanted to see how his transition was. He went from a state of disbelief, living a very loose and careless life, to the point where he was indoctrinated into the Nation of Islam. And thereafter, he learned of the truth of Islam, the truth of Islam as it is taught by Sunni Muslims and the Sunnah of Muhammad alayhi salatu salam. And so, therefore, I found that very intriguing, and his story was uh, one of the more influential pieces of literature that brought me closer to the deen of Islam. So this time frame occurred between the ages of 19 and 25. Um, so during this time frame, um, I lived the same type of life that you see average Americans live. Um, College students, doing this, doing that, things that are not necessarily acceptable in Islam. And but once I read these pieces of literature that pushed me down that path, thereafter I started to read pieces of literature that talked about scientific evidences that are prevalent in the Quran and things that were only recently discovered in modern science, in the modern history of science. And I was very intrigued by the fact that alayhi salatu salam was not only could he not read, but he could not write, and so therefore the Quran could not have come from him, and that he was divinely inspired. Tying these two pieces with these scientific evidences that you see in the Quran, that pushed me even closer and closer to the Deen of Islam. There were some people in my job that were Muslims, but you couldn't tell. They weren't overtly Muslims. They weren't, you know, taking the time to pray, during the time of Salah. But I knew because of their names that they knew something about Islam. And so therefore I would take literature to them and ask them questions during lunch breaks and things like that. And that was a service for them as well as for myself to be more cognizant of Islam and be more cognizant of the need to pull yourselves closer and closer to the Deen of Islam. And so, therefore, around that time frame, about spring, summer 2001, I accepted Islam and put away all of the things that I did prior and accepted and pulled closer to myself a better Islamic life. Um, and then later on that year, probably about December of that same year, my wife accepted Islam. And so that made it even easier for me. So now my entire household becomes more of a Muslim household as opposed to this blend of Islam and non-Islamic type of living. So thereafter, probably about 3 years later, I went to Hajj and completed the 5 pillars of Islam. And then this past year, I completed a second Hajj in 2015. A lot of things in current media are propaganda pieces that can discourage an individual from becoming a Muslim. You're seeing certain individuals that are being accused of activities that is not taught by the Deen of Islam, certain uh, terrorist activity. The media is also shining a light upon American Muslims that have recently become Muslims and are getting involved in these types of activities. But these individuals are outliers. These individuals are the rare cases that do not represent the other 99.9% of Muslims. And so, therefore, there shouldn't be any fear towards making that step, finally putting away these things in your life. Like in my life prior to Islam, um, financially was good, but as far as my peace, um, my desire to do good things, um, as far as my relationship with family, those things were being hampered by not allowing this peace into my heart. And so, knowing what I know now, um, I think that I would have accepted Islam a lot earlier in my life, especially since tomorrow isn't promised to you. Um, your life can be snatched away from you at any moment. You can be involved in a car accident. You can just simply not wake up the next morning. There are various different ways in which people pass away. And so once you're gone, that's it. Your life is over. Your record is no longer being written to, and your test in life is done. And to die without the deen, to die without Islam, to die not on La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is one of the worst ways to perish from this life, because at that point your test in life is over. And so therefore you die on disbelief, you die on kufr. And this is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for his servants. He wants his servants to die on that one belief, the belief in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and belief in the Prophet. That being said, this was my story. It's an individual story, it's a unique story. It may inspire you, and it may be similar to your story, but again, it is my story, but we're more interested in your story.